Fortified School is so unhinged, and reading it can be so much fun. The manga is set in a cyberpunk open-air prison for underage hooligans, where the guards and the teachers exist on a sliding scale between child abuse and fascism. To contrast that, the students try their best to rebel against the system and fuck up everything around them, which leads the school to be full of sex, drugs and violence. And when I say violence, I mean the wildest, most over-the-top violence you can imagine. There is a constant push and pull between the students and their tyrants, and our three main characters are dropped in the middle of this hell. But instead of the system breaking them as intended, they're so true to themselves that the system starts to break around them. And also, some students can turn into animals, others are hunted for sport, and the principal is not doing anything because he's too busy doing magic. And there are like 5 other things happening also at the same time, and all of it is insane. Truly insane.
I do it a vengeance. Spit heads out, shot with class, give me the tension. I do a lot for the mentions. I spaz in other dimensions. About to take it to another level, my attraction came with a pension. Now some niggas gotta respect it or get it retired. I step in the room and anything inspired. Or niggas just hate me shorty in mind. Now tell me what's flame or fire.
The peak in this story was no doubt the first 9 chapters. Everything shown up until then builds such an interesting and vibrant world that was at the same time so restricted by its very nature. The school where they cuff your legs to the desk and the teachers can beat the shit out of you with their iron notebook. And at the same time, when you go to the bathroom, you can buy every drug under the sun. This extreme freedom, contrasted with the extreme strictness of the school itself, can produce such a dynamic story, especially when paired with the breathtaking art direction. Holy fuck, man, what you're looking at right now comes from just one chapter, and not a specific one at that, with like a lot of highlights. No, this is just from a random chapter. So I really mean it when I say every other page in here is a visual feast. The strong intentional line work, the change to watercolors to illustrate haziness, and the variety of different brush techniques can keep you looking at a single page for literal minutes. Some of these illustrations were so striking that I found myself exhibiting the exact same appreciation I would when looking at world-renowned works of art in fancy-ass museums. But you know, I was just looking at a manga from 1994 with only 400 My Anime List members. The way the artist, Mr. Hiromoto, transcends the medium, and even with all the different styles and crazy-ass story beats, manages to keep the title visually consistent is so impressive. Not one panel feels out of place. From the ones with only a face to the ones with a small-scale war in a single panel, they all feel like they're a part of this insane world. With that said, there are a couple flaws here and there with the art. Sometimes there is just too much shit going on in a single panel. The examples I'm showing right now are the worst of it and don't appear in most chapters. And to be completely honest, I think they're meant to be unreadable, so that they can reinforce the chaos that's meant to be happening. So for me, this is just an experimental aspect of the manga I can appreciate. But I do understand how trying to decipher a bunch of scribbles can break your reading flow and how people wouldn't love that. Second on this short list of issues are the nipples. Sometimes you can see the outline of nipples on women. Now, I understand this may seem like a goofy issue to have, considering which manga I'm talking about, but try to stick with me here. Compared to all the asses and penises and straight up nipples that are in the manga, having a nipple outline doesn't seem that crazy. And while I still think it's a little weird, if it was a part of the artist's vision, I would have an easier time accepting it. But the thing is, it's not a part of the vision, because it's incredibly inconsistent. Sometimes it's there, other times it's not. It truly feels like it's slapped on there at random. which is not the case with all the other parts of the artist's vision. The punk graffiti on everything, how the blood looks like it's spilled or sprayed ink, all stylistic choices that stay consistent throughout the manga. But the nipple outline doesn't, because it's a cheap afterthought. Believe me, I know this sounds stupid, but I think this was honestly the biggest turnoff for me on like a visual level. And last but not least is the storyboarding, which isn't necessarily tied to the illustrations, but more to the story itself. Still, that doesn't change the fact that sometimes actions don't flow into each other very well. For example, here's one of our main characters running over to save a random dude from an attack, which results in one of our other main characters getting captured. What you're seeing right now is all the context we have for this interaction. How did the bad dude get her? Did he run over? Because in this panel he seems kinda far away. Or when he magically got there, did she try to run away when she saw his hand going for her? What happened exactly? We just don't know. We're left holding the bag and wondering how this somehow equals this. Of course, when dissecting the interaction for the review, I can assume or infer what happened, and this doesn't seem like that big of a deal. However, when you're in the middle of this tense interaction and you're flipping through the pages to find out what happens, this can make the whole sequence feel very disconnected. Again, I'm not sure whose fault it really is. It very well might have been the artist and his inexperience drawing specifically for a manga, since this was his first one, but I'm inclined to blame the writer, Takeshi Narumi, for orchestrating the encounter in such a goofy way. My bias here comes from the fact that when I look at Fortified School, all the good is connected to the amazing illustrations and the bold art direction, and all the bad is tied to the terrible narrative. I still stand behind my statement. The world does feel very vibrant, and if the story took advantage of it, it could have been very interesting, and possibly be renowned as a cult classic just by engaging with the dynamic world alone. But that can only happen when our main characters are given the freedom to exist in this world and make decisions for themselves. And that ability is taken away in chapter 9. For the rest 26 chapters, they're bouncing from one thing to another without taking a single decision. They're forced to exist on a very narrow path, and they have their agency taken away on a regular basis, which leaves them as a secondary element in their own story. With that said, I'm not gonna pretend like chapter 9 was the make or break moment for the manga, because even before and definitely after that, there are plenty of bad amateurish writing tropes that plague the title. There are so many useless or interesting plot lines that don't go anywhere. There is setup, there is intrinsic motivation, there's potential for beautiful full circle moments, and they're just forgotten or resolved laughably easy. That happens because the author sometimes just doesn't want to deal with the complexities of having a functional story, and because the characters at their core are incredibly shallow. By that I don't mean that they're exaggerated stereotypes, which would be fine, because even they have something going for them. In fact, the best characters in here are exactly those over-the-top caricatures that have a couple cool lines of dialogue here and there. You could argue that Gentaro, the best of our main characters in my opinion, falls into this category, but unfortunately he suffers the most from all the unresolved plot lines and is passively pushed off to the side. And the other two, Mei and Itsuki, exclusively throughout the whole manga talk about each other. The author forms a relationship between them out of thin air, and that literal nothing is used as the main engine of their character. If they were stereotypes, at least they would have like 4 shallow things to say instead of 1. Crazy fumble. By far the worst aspect of the manga is how unlikable the main characters are. I can continue giving more examples of how the story fails to be compelling, but I think you get the idea. So I'm gonna give you one more and we're gonna wrap this up. At some point the plot splits in 2 parts, one focusing on the school secrets and the other one on the school rebellion. And I kid you not, they do not interact with each other at all. You could take all the parts with the secrets or all the parts with the rebellion out of the manga, and the story that's left will be virtually untouched. That, of course, can be innovative and even impressive as a story structure if done intentionally and with purpose. But here, it's very clearly not done that way. I'm just not ready to give the story the same amount of grace I gave to the art earlier. But at the same time, I know what I was getting into. In the first chapter, Mei wins a staring contest with a tiger. I could infer from there that the insanity was gonna be a priority instead of the good story structure, and I was fine with that. My hope, however, was that the craziness would seep into the narrative and that could produce some interesting story beats that can actually captivate your attention. But instead, the manga offers a bunch of insane plot beats and visuals that are tied together in an extremely mediocre way. So I hope the fact that I'm giving this a strong 7 helps to highlight even more how impressive the art direction is. This title is worth reading solely based on that. Fun fact, the first time I read Fortified School was almost exactly 2 years ago, because somebody recommended it on our Discord, and I liked it so much it got on my future reviews list, and it stayed there, and now it's a review. So if you want to talk manga and throw a couple recommendations to everybody in there, feel free to join. The next 2 reviews will be on these titles, so if you want to read with me and be ready for when the reviews drop, you can do that too. And I'm actually pretty excited to make them, because I feel like the review format is finally starting to click for me. So let's fucking go, man. I'll see you soon. The sun has set, my light source is gone, this probably looks like shit. Whatever. See ya.